in the studio with me, Neil McCabe, political reporter with One America News Network, OANN.com, the website. And Neil, welcome back.
Good to see you, Tom, and hello to all the listeners.
Indeed. Thank you. New report from Common Dreams, Sarah Lazare, the staff writer there, or a staff writer there, writing. A new report from the Center for Responsive Politics finds single candidate groups have spent $16.2 million total so far, over 55 times the level seen in 2012, and conservatives disproportionately benefit. Now, the conservative position, which I don't consider conservative. I don't think Barry Goldwater would have considered this conservative. But the today's, quote, conservative position is basically, if it's good for billionaires, if it's good for big corporations, it's called conservative. And so billionaires have a lot of money, big corporations have a lot of money, and they're pouring a lot of money into buying, quote, conservative politicians to represent their interests. On the other side, you've got moderate Republicans and Democrats who represent, and some Democrats, who represent people, actual people, voters, union members, things like that. And they got nothing close to this kind of money. Isn't it time for us to say that American politics are not for sale?
I don't know if American politics are for sale at all. If somebody, like for instance, say a congressman or a senator supports restoring legal protection to the unborn, I might give them money. I'm not bribing him. He gave a speech. I like him. I support him. These presidential candidates, they meet in Winnebagos. They meet at farm stands and barbecues and office buildings, and they tell these businessmen and farmers or other people, "Hey, this is what I want to do. If you're in, you're in." I mean, I don't see people suddenly changing their positions just because they're running for president.
No, I think you're right. I think that they sit down in the very beginning and say, okay, I'm going to run as a Republican. So I've got to say there is no global warming. Regulations that make Coke Industries less profitable are bad. Abortion is a terrible thing, et cetera. Okay, or I'm going to run.
A lot of people believe that before they run for office.
Or I'm going to run as a Democrat, and so I have to take the position that the labor unions are good, and that we should be supporting labor unions, and that the minimum wage should be raised, and that we should have health care for all. I get that, and then those people go out there and they try to raise money, and the money comes back from people who support their positions. I get that, what you're saying. The problem, though, with it, Neil, is that the money on the side of the conservative/Republicans, although there are conservative Democrats too. We should probably take out Republican and Democrat from this and use conservative and liberal, because there are both in both parties. Well, there are both in the Democratic. I'm
comfortable with that construct.
Okay, fine, thank you. That conservative, by nature of its recent redefinition since the Reagan Revolution, actually means corporatist and lackey for the rich. And so the politicians who decide that they're going to go into Republican politics, number one, have to take those positions, and number two, know that when they leave, like Eric Cantor, they're going to be offered a $4 million job, a year job, if as Eric Cantor was, as payback for all the good legislation they passed. This is a broken system, Neil.
Well, you see what people you would identify as conservatives are opposing crony capitalism. Are opposing.
No, they're not. They're taking all the crony capitalism they can. They're
look at
opposing.
This trough of these green energy barons who are ripping us off with these solar panel.
You're making my point.
These wind power.
You're making my point. Well, the Coke Industries,
the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is basically picking winners and losers. The Export Import Bank.
Point.
The Export Import Bank is corporate interests, and where the Republican Party, or at least conservatives, are flat out against the Chamber of Commerce. You see it in Obamacare, where the big corporate interests, like the other NRA, the National Restaurant Association, put in all of these sort of rules and regulations.
You are making my point, Neil.
But the Republicans have been opposing that.
No.
The conservatives have been opposing that.
The American Republicans maybe oppose some pieces of that. But by and large, this whole we're against crony capitalism thing is BS, and you know it.
No,
the fact of the matter is that Coke Industries is not going to come out and say, we're not going to take those oil subsidies. Thank you very much. That's crony capitalism. We're not going to do that.
Well, I don't.
We do $5 trillion a year worth of subsidies for the fossil fuel
deductions?
There's a whole variety of subsidies.
If you eliminated the corporate taxes, you wouldn't have a lot of these sort of
come on.
loopholes and deductions.
A,
And
don't change the subject. And B,
yes,
my point was that there's more money from big corporations for politicians than there is from the average working person. So the interests of big corporations are being met right now in America, and the interests of average working people are not. Working people are getting screwed, and they have been since the election of Reagan. And the reason for that, and it goes back to the Buckley case in 1976 before the Supreme Court, was the Supreme Court ruled that money is protected. Money
you have to have money in politics, Tom.
Is protected. No, you don't.
You do.
You do not.
Let me make this point then. Michael Bloomberg wants to be president. He's sort of laid the groundwork for it in 2008. He wanted to run even in 2012. He has 3 times the money of Trump. You could argue 1,000 times, and who knows what his balance sheet really is. Michael Bloomberg has enough money to run for president.
Right.
And he will never be president in my lifetime or his lifetime because people don't like him. In the end, the voters aren't going to vote for somebody just because they're rich.
Neil, I'm talking about a systemic problem.
Yes.
You're pulling out one outlier example to try to knock that down.
Well, Jay Rockefeller was a very wealthy guy. He self-financed his campaigns, and the liberals loved him. But if the voters didn't love him, he wouldn't have been elected. There's plenty of examples. Mitt Romney raised $800 million just for his campaign, not even counting the outside groups. And yet he's not president. People just didn't like him. Obama raised $1 billion. But Obama didn't need that $1 billion. I would suggest that Obama would have won if he had spent $500 million.
Whether that's the case or not,
but what are you going to do?
You're still not addressing the issue of the fact that the legislation being first. Bernie Sanders has not hired a single pollster.
Okay,
and look at what's happening. I think that
he's got quite an assist from the media, Tom.
Actually, it's the opposite of that.
No.
If you want an assist in the media, talk to Donald Trump.
You want to see love on bended knee, it's for Bernie Sanders, excuse me, in the media. That is...
Right. But setting
aside, that. Trump's benefited too.
The question is, how do we stop this process that's been going on for 34 years of virtually all legislation being to the benefit of big corporations and fat cats and billionaires, and virtually nothing that benefits the average person? This is the study that came out of Princeton just 7 months ago. You remember this. You know what I'm talking about. The probability of what the top 10% wants or what corporate America wants is over 60% in terms of legislative outcome. The probability of what the average working person wants, more than 60% of the average working people want, is equivalent to random noise.
Well, yes, but Tom, part of the problem is that so much of the power and the authority is now concentrated in Washington, that these are the only people or organizations that have the heft to do the lift.
That's not true. You've got all. You've got
states. A tremendous amount.
The Koch brothers have.
There's a tremendous amount of authority.
In
Washington.
Look at what Scott Walker did in Wisconsin. Sure, there is.
So get rid of the EPA. Get rid of the Department of Education. Get rid of the Department of Energy.
So we're going to let the Cuyahoga River catch on fire again. We're just going to
Cuyahoga. How about the Animas River that the EPA dumped 3 million gallons?
No, it wasn't the EPA.
Toxin.
It was a private for-profit contractor.
I will tell you, sir. Point of fact. I was in the hearing room when Gina McCarthy said that the contractor would not be held liable because they were working on the direct authority of the EPA and they were doing what the EPA told them to do.
Which is a terrible situation.
But
this goes back to Reagan era legislation or policies that encouraged federal agencies to outsource things to private for-profit corporations.
I have a problem with that. You're talking about A76. I agree with you.
But we are,
and the contract is far afield. I believe that money is an expression. And frankly, if you're running against the President of the United States, how else do you compete against Air Force One? We're going to have Biden and Obama traveling around in Air Force One and Air Force Two with all of the security and all of the staff.
You get the last word here.
How do you compete with that? I'm filibustering you, Tom.
I know you are.
Thom Hartmann Program.
Neil McCabe, OANN.com is the website. Neil, thanks for dropping by.
Sure.
You still haven't convinced me.
Next time.
We'll be back.